On a cold, starless night, a small boat carrying 27 migrants attempting to cross the English Channel began to sink. They called the coastguard for help, but rescue never came. And this is Small Boat by Vincent Delecroix. Tragic stories are usually told from the perspective of the victims, but Small Boat takes a different approach where it focuses on someone who played a role in the tragedy. And so you learn how this character processed an event that cost so many lives and how she contributed to it. Small Boat is a nominee for the International Booker Prize this year. It's based on a real tragedy that happened on November 2021 when 27 migrants drowned while trying to cross the English Channel. What happened was their small boat started taking on water hours after leaving the French coast. Although they made emergency calls to both the French and UK rescue services, the help came too late, and it was then revealed there were problems in communications between the two countries. What makes this fiction, based on a true story, so interesting is how the author, who is also a philosopher, makes us reflect uncomfortably through the perspective of the operator on duty that night. The story is divided into 3 parts. The first part opens from the perspective of an operator at CROSS, the French Coast Guard Rescue Center, who's being interrogated by a police officer. She has to listen again to the recording from the night of the incident and explain the reasons behind her responses on the call. While listening, she recalls what had happened that night, her conversation with her colleague Julian, thoughts about her daughter Leah, and how her ex-husband used to hold negative opinion about migrants and often mocked her for helping them. In the second part, we're shown what happened that night from the perspective of the caller. A group of 30 migrants, along with others, began their journey at night in a small boat. But a couple of hours later, the boat started leaking, and one of the migrants tried calling rescue teams in both the UK and France, back and forth. Eventually, their small boat began to sink, and slowly, one by one, they lost their lives. To quote from the book, "The communication was poor. The signal kept cutting out. Around him, the voices of the passengers were getting louder and louder, and he couldn't hear everything. He thought he heard them promise help. Now the English and French had both been alerted. There was nothing to be done but wait. But waiting was the hardest thing." The third part brings us back to the operator's perspective. Here, she remains trapped in her own thoughts. The external interrogation from the police and the public, slowly all of it blends with her own interrogation to herself, where she questions her moral values, her role as a rescue worker, a mother, a citizen, and an ordinary individual. Outside of her only feeling and thinking about herself, this chapter reminds us that tragedies like this aren't just the fault of one person. They are the result of a system that fails to protect those most vulnerable. My thoughts on this book is that it's a heavy topic. It's the one that makes you also see the side on the minds from those who are privileged, or maybe even though they state that they're not racist, but they are bystanders, which is also just worst. And in this book, the operator insists she was simply being professional, just following orders. But even in the first line in part 1, we're immediately met with her cold words saying, "I didn't ask you to leave," I said. "It was your ideas. And if you didn't want to get your feet wet, love, you shouldn't have embarked." So, while in some parts we're led to sympathize with her character, trying to understand her situation, dealing with similar cases at sea every day, maybe it made her become numbed from it all. And after all, she's just a mother who deeply loves her daughter. But we can't deny the truth. How could she respond so coldly to the emergency calls and choose not to send help? Was this her way of detaching from a trauma she couldn't yet face? Or is she truly cold? Overall, Small Boat is a brilliant short novel. It's also translated very clearly and easy to understand. Again, it's not an easy read because of its theme and how it forces you to reflect on your own sense of humanity, but that's also why it's such an important book. And though the story focuses mainly on the operator and her inner thoughts, and only briefly touches on the responsibilities of others beyond her, it speaks powerfully to all of us as witnesses to similar tragedies that continue to happen every day.